Go back to Numbers chapter 16 today. It's a continuation of what we began last week, dealing with Korah's opposition. In this week, we're going to look at verses 23 really through the end of the chapter, and it won't take us that long to get through the section. So this morning I want us to spend just a little bit of time at the outset of class, dealing with perhaps one of the biggest misconceptions that man has of God. And when you talk to people and you tell them that God is a severe God and that God hates, what's more often than not the reaction that you get? Yeah, or they'll say, well, how can you say such a thing about God? God is a God of love and grace. And as a result of, you run into people who'll take this idea to its logical end, who will say that God would never condemn or punish anyone and that he will tolerate all sorts of behavior. And it is this misconception of who God is that has led to the problem of men rejecting God. Is love and anger incompatible? No. You have
to stand for something and have anger against the devil.
Right.
And
sin. In fact, does not love necessitate anger when wrong is committed? Think about the parent-child relationship. If a parent loves their child, when a child does wrong, does not their love for their child sort of provoke the anger? It should. If you love your child, you're going to be upset with your child for doing what they know they shouldn't have done. And I think we can understand. I think we can better understand God's love and his anger in light of this basic principle of a parent-child relationship. Think about it this way. How did you and I come to be? Where did mankind come from? Come from God. So God is our creator. The prophet Zechariah says that God is the father of our spirit. So as human beings, as the human race, we are the offspring of God, as it were, are we not? So God is our father, and we are, and again, using it in terms of the human race, not using it in the context of Christianity, the human race is the children of God, and God is our father as our creator. And so he has the right to make the rules. And so, in the parent-child relationship, when the child misbehaves or gets out of line, what does the parent do, or what should we do as parents?
We should train them first of all from the beginning of infancy.
Yep.
As best we can. Now, I don't believe in, I may be displeased with some of my children, but I don't want to go to the point of anger and trying to punish them to a degree that's beyond my way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I still love them, even though they don't listen to what I'm trying to say to them.
Right.
But I'm dearly.
Well, and I think you can apply that to God. From the very outset of time, God tried to train man to follow his ways, to follow him, to listen to him. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, that's just a general maxim. But certainly when we train up our children in the proper way, generally speaking, they will follow. However, when we refuse to listen to our parents, you ever do that? Your parents tell you not to do something and you just continue to keep on keeping on in that behavior?
Mine got real smart about 3 weeks after I got married. I don't have any sense. About 3 weeks or a month, which they knew what they was talking about.
Yeah. So, as parents, we can become angry. Does God get angry with his people? Indeed. Sin angers God. In Psalm 7 and verse 11, the psalmist affirmed that God is angry with the wicked every day. Now, why is God angry with the wicked?
Because he loves us and he wants everybody to be saved. And the plans out there, they just accept it.
Exactly. He loves them and he wants people to be saved. And certainly it's because of sin. Because of what sin is. and what sin does. And sin is opposed to all that God stands for, and thus sin must be punished. Yet so many believe and act as if they can live and do things anyway without consequence, and perhaps that's why Korah and his merry band of henchmen thought in their rebellion against God. But let's see this morning what happened when they decided to rebel against God. And let's see how God deals with Korah and with all those who rebelled against divine authority. And so as we come to number 16, having said all that, verses 23 through 27, we're going to see the end result of all this, of sin, is death. And that's what we're going to see in this account. If someone would, let's look at verses 23 through 27. And if someone would, we're not going to read every verse in this section, but I do want us to read a few verses. And if someone would, let's go ahead and read these few verses here, verses 23 through 27.
The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the congregation, saying, Get you up from about the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Moses rose up and went unto Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spake unto the congregation, saying, Depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest ye be consumed in all their sins. So they gat up from the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram on every side, and Dathan and Abiram came out and stood in the door of their tents, and their wives and their sons and their little children.
All right, thank you, Sister Dusty. So God tells Moses, go tell the children of Israel to get you up from about the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. That's the instruction, and certainly Moses does as God commands. Now, why did God tell Moses to tell Israel? Why was Moses instructed to tell Israel to separate themselves from these three?
Well, they ought to. They're living in a bad situation.
It was very bad.
They were destroyed, just like today almost. They're destroying God in whatever fashion or form they could. And so somebody needs to speak up. They spoke up to no avail.
Yeah. And they're going to pay the price. And now, why do you think God told them not to lay a hand on anything which belonged to these individuals? God tells them, touch nothing of theirs.
You either have to leave sin alone or it'll get you.
Leave sin alone or it'll get you. Does this not sort of remind you of a little bit of the events regarding Achan and what he did? Yeah, and we see the penalty. It brought defeat to Israel. So there's a little bit of that, and yet that's later on in their history. We're prior to that, but I think we see a little bit. It sort of reminds you of that, because God tells Israel here, touch nothing, and he told Israel then, take nothing of the spoils of Jericho. Well, Israel here is going to listen to them. And it's also important to note, he says, lest ye be consumed in all of their sins. And now what's the significance of that?
I think see the faith. They'll do what God says.
Yeah.
Do what he says.
Don't follow them. Get away from them. Separate yourself. Don't follow in the path of the ungodly. I think we're going to get the picture. And certainly you don't want to be around this place.
And nothing they have is good. You don't want it.
Yeah.
It's defiled.
In verse 27, well, they did as they were told. They got up from the tabernacle. Now, I think it's going to be interesting as we come later on in the chapter to see the behavior of Israel after everything happens. But at this juncture, hey, everything's all right. They did as Moses said. Now let's look at Moses' proclamation in verses 28 through 30. If someone would, let's read these three verses.
And Moses said, Hereby you shall know that the Lord hath sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of mine own
Down through verse 30, Sister Nana.
If these men die the common death of all men, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord hath not sent me. But if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth opens her mouth and swallowed them up with all that appertains unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord.
Thank you, Sister Nana. 3 things here. 1 point from each verse. Number 1, what was Israel going to come to know?
Real God.
They're going to come to know God, the real God yet again. They're going to recognize that it was the God of heaven who had sent Moses to do all these things. Again, God is going to affirm Moses, I guess you could say jokingly, for the 1,000th time, that he was God's chosen spokesperson. And he's going to affirm that he really is. And as a result, they're going to recognize that Moses was truthful and that the works done were not of his own mind or purpose, according to here, verse number 28. Now, what would Israel think, according to verse number 29, if those men just simply died a common death of all men? If they just simply died of natural causes?
They would think he came to God.
Yeah. You know, would it be a sign to Israel that they were on the right path and that they were correct in following Korah, Dathan, and Abiram? And so, but if they died an unnatural death by miraculous means, what would Israel then know?
That it was God's doing.
And it was God's doing.
They were always asking for a sign, and they couldn't one.
Indeed. So, verse number 30, what were they going to see?
God had sent Moses.
God had sent Moses. In fact, God said, you're going to see something you've never seen before. Now, up to this point, what had Israel seen?
The Red Sea part,
They'd see the Red Sea parted.
manna from heaven, water from a rock.
There you go, Sister Roberta. They'd seen water come miraculously gushing from a rock. God had given them manna from heaven. They'd seen the Egyptians drown in the Red Sea. They crossed over on dry ground. But now God's telling them, I'm going to show you something you ain't never seen before.
At this time, had they had any of those plagues that would like pass through and kill so many or somebody? Had any of those happened before this plague hit?
Fires on the outer camp.
Well, remember, if you go back to Numbers chapter 11, when we first started the book, you'll find that God sent a plague on the outer camp of Israel.
They had seen him.
They'd seen it before. And that's not going to be the only time he sent it. In fact, we're going to see it again here in this chapter. And again, several more times in the book, in the account. But here, regarding these men, God says, you ain't seen nothing yet. What's he going to do? He's going to destroy them, and he's going to use a unique way to do it. Opening up the earth. Now, if the earth, imagine, God saying, I'm going to, the earth's going to open up and swallow up these men. Can you imagine, how would you feel hearing these words?
Wouldn't it be a sign if Washington just opened up and swallowed?
What's that?
If Washington, D.C. opened up and swallowed about half that's up there, I bet you'd see some change.
I think hey, that might be needed in our, maybe.
Amen.
If we understand what we read, and maybe we do, maybe we don't, it's disastrous. Neither one of these parties, either one of them, or either 4 of them if you got independent friends.
Yeah.
What we got is not fitting to govern America.
Right.
But this guy wanted to go with the
God has to handle
Israelites.
Exactly. And we're going to talk about that in the lesson tonight on providence in the nations. And, God rules in the kingdoms of men. And God setteth up rulers that he allows men to rule. But we're going to see, sometimes when it comes to leadership and the society gets what they ask for.
I think that just what you said, that God is still in control, I'm paraphrasing. It's is the most comforting thing for me right now. That I just have to leave it in His hands.
And I think that's one of the most comforting things in the Scripture, Sister Nana, is to study the Old Testament, and you see these examples of rebellion, but yet it doesn't. These acts of rebellion are brought to naught.
And sin will find you out.
Exactly.
And it's hard to be disappointed in your leaders. It takes you back so many years in politics, and you just don't want to be disappointed.
And that's why, I think as Christians, that's why we don't put our trust in men, we put our trust in God.
Men let you down.
He won't let you down. In God we trust. That's where our faith is. If we put our faith and trust in men, I like how Brother Ricky puts it, men will let you down all the time, but God will never let you down. Because He'll never forsake us, and He is faithful that is promised. And we're going to see His faithfulness once again seen here. All right, let's look at verses 31 through 50 now in God's action. If someone would, let's look at verses 31 through 35. And we won't read these verses because I have several points we want to look at here. But as we look at verses 31 through 35, when God pronounced this judgment, how immediate was it according to verse 31? Right then, exactly, Sister Dusty, because verse 31 starts off, and it came to pass as he had finished speaking these words. Again, this is immediate. As soon as he finished speaking, the ground clave asunder that was under them. It opened up. That's the manifestation of the judgment there. The earth opened her mouth. Again, can you imagine just standing there, hearing these words, and then all of a sudden the ground just, that would be a pretty,
Moses prayed for this too, did he not?
Yeah, he prayed.
Prayer again.
And what was the result of the judgment according to verse 32? Let's read that verse. Read verse 32. What was the result of the judgment?
And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households, and all men with Korah, with all their goods. It's a pretty comprehensive judgment, is it not, Sister Roberta? Swallowed up Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Now think about this. They were alive when they went down into the earth. Whew.
Now, was all these people supposedly destroyed, or what about those that didn't follow that route at that time?
They were spared,
Now we're going to come to that here in just a moment, Brother Carl. That's a good question. Did the entirety of their families perish in this act?
Korah's children did not.
Well, let's look at Numbers 26. Let's turn over there right quick. I was talking with a fellow preacher this week, and they're going through the same book we are. And we got to talking on this section, and then he pointed out this passage to me that I hadn't even thought of. Look at verses 9 through 11. In the tribe of here it's given us an account of the tribe of Reuben, the genealogy of that. And the sons of Eliab, Nemuel, and Dathan, and Abiram. This is that Dathan and Abiram. Again, God here specifies that this was those who were famous in the congregation who strove against Moses and Aaron in the company of Korah. Again, verse 10 gives us the account of that. Look at verse 11 though. Notwithstanding, the children of Korah died not. Now, it would appear to me from this text, from Numbers 26:11, it would appear that Korah's children had no part in the conspiracy and were spared. Would that not be a good takeaway from what verse 11 says there in Numbers 26? But note as well, it has nothing to say about Dathan and Abiram's families. So it could be the case that their families were involved and thus experienced the same fate as their fathers, unlike the children of Korah.
See,
Right.
It just says all the men.
Right. All the men. So I think Numbers 26:11 helps clarify some of this. Now, how did Israel react to the judgment according to verse 34? What was their immediate reaction to seeing this look again just open up underneath these men? How did they react? They panicked. They fled and they were crying out, let's get away from here. The earth could swallow us up as well. They didn't want it. They didn't want to be around. Now,
Some people will say that's just an earthquake.
an earthquake. If that was Brother Larry, if that was an earthquake, it would have caused damage in it.
Well, they predicted it just before it happened.
He predicted it, and it was just in the ground. And the only area of ground that opened up was right underneath these men. And then you also notice that God closed it up as if it had never happened. So that's a miracle, is it not? That's not just a mere natural occurrence. That's an earthquake. An earthquake leaves damage. God made it known He was there. He opened up the earth, but then He closed it back up on these men. And again, that's skeptics will try to deny it. Try to deny the bit.
History Channel will explain it somehow.
Well, if you watch the History Channel, you can.
It's dangerous to watch these.
It is, but if you know the Bible, you can get a good laugh from the History Channel. I turned it on a few years ago, and they were talking about the book of Ezekiel, and they said that the glory of God that's depicted in Ezekiel chapter 1 was a UFO. And then, regarding the Exodus, the History Channel said, well, Israel came through the wilderness. They were led by aliens who were guiding them via their UFOs, unidentified flying objects. Now, how absurd is that?
That's having faith. They have faith in that theory.
They have faith in that theory. And
But they ridicule our faith in God.
isn't that amazing? They claim it's foolish to have faith in the God of heaven, but yet if you question their faith in the things of men, well, you're wrong.
Well, I thought last week when Rusty visited that college, they got to take the class. That was part of their visit, then you got to take the class. And he chose the class on the Bible. And it's scary because they don't teach the Bible. They spend their time trying to disprove the Bible instead of teaching the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sad because, young people like that are easily swayed.
Yeah. Young people, and that's why it's so important young people like Russ, have a strong faith going into that situation so we can answer the those who would discredit it.
Those are people with authority, and they speak with authority.
Mm-hmm.
I had a Baptist friend who theology instructors in college were all atheists.
Yeah.
And he said, but to get through my theology, or to get through my, certificate or degree or whatever, he had to take those classes. And he said they're taught by atheists.
Yeah. I know. I have a lot of friends who, a lot of my friends I know a lot of good friends who went to college of various, religious backgrounds, denominational backgrounds, who profess the belief in God. Well, I know several of them who went off to college and came back an atheist. You know any like that?
When we visited Emory the week before, one of the guys that welcomed us or whatever was one of the professors. And he was from Germany, yet he taught Islam at that college. And it makes you afraid to send your children off anywhere as to what they will hear.
Folks, there is something tacitly wrong with society when they say you got to learn Islam, but you can't learn anything about the God of heaven in the Bible in our schools. There's something wrong, is there not?
I know it was in the textbooks at a high school level when my grandson was there. And it made me mad. I was looking at his books.
Mm-hmm. And we have a right to be mad. And all the while they're claiming, separation of church and state. If you're going to claim that, does that not apply to Islam? It would be total separation. And should that not apply to the religion of Islam as well, if you're going to go that route?
It should apply to everything.
Should apply, if you're going to take that route, it should apply to everything. But they're being inconsistent in that. Are they not? It almost sounds like it's. Would you agree with this? And again, I know we're probably chasing a rabbit here. Do you believe it's an attempt at establishing a more favored religion? Or trying to force a religion on other people?
You're making it more and more acceptable. It's layer by layer. You're making it more acceptable.
You are.
Christianity has been attacked.
You can see what you're made to accept. Back in the 20s, you couldn't see a woman's ankles.
Mm.
And now that, because society, the more and more you see it, then it just becomes commonplace to you.
And you look at the religion of Islam, and you look at how they treat women. How could any right-thinking individual want to follow such a barbaric religion?
Well, they do it today.
Yeah.
They're still doing it. You can't, back then they punished people. Well, today they're promoting sin and destruction. I'm talking about our leaders of the United States of America have instituted it, like gay marriage and all this stuff, and drugs, and they're promoting it.
They are. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. And it's nothing new. You look at the history of Israel, and we'll talk more about it to an extent tonight, how the leaders in Israel promoted sin, some of the kings in Israel. But again, Israel got what they asked for. And, they wanted to follow sinful men rather than righteousness. And we're going to see here in just a moment how Israel truly felt about Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Look at verse 35. After the earth opened up, what happened now? And after Israel became fearful, what happened? What does God do secondly? Verse 35.
250 people with fire.
They were punished. And obviously they were joined along with Korah's little rebellion.
Or wasn't this the man that Moses told him to appoint so many men with a little sense?
I would think so, yes.
Whoever's fire didn't consume them.
I believe you're right, Sister Dusty. I would agree with that. And certainly this judgment was certainly to appease God's righteousness and to show the consequences of sin. Is it not? It also stresses to us the fact that it is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. Look at verses 36 through 40 very briefly now. I want to really, God, there was a new commandment given to Eleazar, one of Aaron's sons, and he was get together the censers of those men who were consumed by the fire and to make broad plates as a cover for the altar. And the reason being was they would be a sign unto the Israelites of what happens to those who think they can improve on God's will and God's design. As Korah and the rest who were destroyed thought they could, and Eleazar did as he was instructed. And so verse 40, we have the actual account of this. And it was to serve to remind Israel that it is a serious matter to show blatant disrespect for God. And isn't that what Korah did and those who are involved in this rebellion? Was it not showing disrespect and disdain for God and His authority? Indeed it was. And, and that's why religious division is so serious. And that's why we plead with people. You talk with people, you plead with people, and sometimes it feels like you're banging your head against a brick wall. Come out. Come out. Just simply follow the Bible. Don't follow mankind. Just follow God's word. Do as God says. And we wouldn't have the confusion in religion if people would simply just read the Bible. Be like the noble Bereans. Search the Scriptures daily to make sure what you are taught is so. However, though, Israel would not take this warning to heart. Look at verses 41 through 50. We have yet another judge.
That's unbelievable after seeing this, that they would still not believe.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. Because here we see yet another same old song and dance routine. I guess that's the best way you could put it, is it not, with Israel? What do they do according to verse 41? What happened the very next day? What did they accuse Moses and Aaron of doing?
Destroying.
Killing the people of God. Do we not see this like when we go to war now, you know, and the bleeding heart say, oh, you can't kill the women and children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you go in a country to take the country, like where we've been over in the Middle East, you know, they don't want to fight because you'll kill innocent women and children. But that's the price that has to be paid.
Mm-hmm. You know, and a lot of people, you know, accuse God of being barbaric because of his driving out the Canaanites. But remember, those children, you know, a lot of the innocents, well, you think about those who died, some obviously went to heaven, those little children. Well, why would God do that? Because he knew they'd be in a better place, and they wouldn't be influenced by the sin around them. You know, and so Israel's behaving like so many people do here today. You killed Korah, you killed Dathan and Abiram. They were the people of the Lord. Well, were they of the Lord? No. You know, if...
They wanted to do what they wanted.
Yeah. Now, if you were Moses here, would it not be a case that you would probably just want to go up, find a place, and just start banging your head against it?
And so they still blame Moses.
Yeah. It's amazing. They blame Moses and Aaron again. However, look at verses 42 and 43. As they are speaking, what happens? Who else hears this? Oh, so God, this is almost immediately, is it not? As soon as they say this, the glory of God immediately appeers.
So don't you make it wonder? They didn't want to follow Moses, yet they thought he had the power to make this happen.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't think he was sent from God. Where did they think he got the power?
Exactly. Probably like the Pharisees did. Remember when they accused Jesus? He cast out devils by the power of Beelzebub. I guess that's the only thing you can think of here is, I guess they thought Moses was doing this by the power of Beelzebub. But look at verse 45. What does God want to do again? You know, he wants... We just saw this in the when they refused to enter the promised land, did we not? God wanted to wipe Israel off the map. He wants to do it again. He's saying enough's enough. But again, verse 46 through 48. What does Moses and Aaron do?
Pray to God again.
They pray to God again. They make intercession. This time Moses tells Aaron, you take a censer, put fire therein from off the altar, take incense, go quickly unto the congregation, make an atonement for them. And there's a wrath gone out from the Lord. The plague is begun. And Aaron did as he was told. God poured out his wrath. But you look at verses 47 and 48. We're told in verse 48 that Aaron stood between the dead and the living. And what happened? The plague was stayed. Isn't this marvelous? God was going to wipe them out, but yet here you have Moses and Aaron interceding again. And isn't that the beautiful... And doesn't this make us that much more appreciative of what Christ did for us as our intercessor and what he continues to do for us as our mediator and intercessor with the Father? He died in our place, and, you know, we should... What's that, Brother Carl?
Give us that hope.
Give us that hope. Exactly, Brother Ricky. I'm sorry.
The whole structure of the covenants, the New Testament with the Lord as our King, is so much easier than what, except you have to fight the devil now, not denying that.
Yeah.
It's so much easier. Who could go to Jerusalem 3 times a year. And it's just, and it's out, the Lord respected women,
Yeah.
even the lady at the well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a wonderful thing that he did for us. And he must have been so disappointed. The Lord chose the Israelites to be his own people.
Mm-hmm. But he used Israel as well for a specific purpose.
Yes, to teach that they should obey him.
And of course, he used Israel to bring Christ into the world, but he also used Israel to teach us a lesson. You know,
The shadows of the
yep, Romans 15:4, exactly right, Sister Nana.
But Christ died for us, which is salvation, but he did so much more for good. I mean, if I might use the word comfort, I don't mean to lull and not do work, but he's just done so much for us, and we disappoint him.
Mm-hmm. And when we come later on in the book, here in a few weeks, when we get to Numbers 21, we're really going to see an Old Testament picture of the Christ that was to come. When God sent the fiery serpents down on Israel for their rebellion against, Moses did what? God told Moses to do what?
Make a thing, and they look up like that, and if they looked upon them in the circle, if he did them, it wouldn't.
Raised up a brazen serpent. We're going to look at that, and I'm probably going to preach a sermon that day as well on Christ. You know, the brazen serpent is a type of Christ. Beautiful picture there, and we're going to see a lot of that. And that's the value of the Old Testament we're seeing. We see the Christ, and we see the need for the Christ here. In verse 49, how many died as a result of this plague?
14,700.
And again, that doesn't count those who died in the matter pertaining to Korah now, does it? Or would this be a total figure?
I think it says beside them.
Yeah, beside them that died. So this doesn't take to count those. Did these deaths have to occur?
They didn't have to.
It didn't have to. How would they not have occurred?
Obey God to start with.
If they had just simply obeyed God to start with. Korah and them didn't have to die. All they had to do was just simply obey God. Yet Israel had no one to blame but themselves for the wrath of God being poured out upon them. And isn't that the case today? If men die lost, it's not God's fault. It's his fault. And we understand why men die lost, and it's because of sin. And God, and as we have seen in this study, God has a right to be angered by sin because of who he is and who we are.